Welcome to our latest Public Affairs Lecture Series. I'm Aaron Scavland. Welcome to the students in the two courses and members of the public and the wider campus who are here with us today. Just a reminder to my students to this would be a good lecture to write a response to. So, all right, I am very happy. Feel immense pleasure to welcome Kira Johnson back to campus. And actually, I had forgotten this. Kira worked here at the Kennedy Center, so back to. Not only a place where she studied, but also where she worked. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, mention a few highlights. Kira may cover some of this ground again, but I think it doesn't hurt for you to hear it twice. So Kira graduated in 2019. She majored in geography with an emphasis in urban and regional planning, and she minored in civic engagement. She was also, from 2017 to 2019, the vice chair of the Joaquin neighborhood just south of campus. So I think just from those highlights alone, and that's just scratching the surface, Kira was a student who got everything she could get out of her experience here on campus and in the wider community. So I hope you'll take note of that. Since graduating, in the last 5 years, Kira has worked as a planner in Waynesboro, Virginia, just over the mountain from Charlottesville, Virginia. And I feel lucky to have had the opportunity to visit her when she was in Waynesboro and to hear some of the great stuff that she did there. And then I was able to, well, I can't really take credit for this, but we were happy to have her return to Provo, I think about 2 years later, and she became the director of the Provo Bicycle Collective, which was at the time the most dynamic nonprofit in the community. And she also, once again, became involved with Bike Walk Provo as well, and as a volunteer. In the last year, she left Provo again and broke our hearts, but she's not far away. She's now working as a planner in the Public Lands Department in Salt Lake City. She's done some interesting things since she graduated, and I hope you'll listen carefully to her experiences as she has done interesting things in terms of her career, but also been very much involved in the wider community, whether that was in Virginia or here in Provo or now in Salt Lake. So, I did forget to mention one thing. When Kira graduated, she was the recipient of a BYU Citizen of the Year Award, Student Citizen of the Year Award, and I believe that was awarded to her by the Office of Civic Engagement. I don't know the history of that award, but I'm not sure that award has been awarded since then or was awarded before then. So that may tell you a lot, just how active Kira was both here on campus and in the community. And, 'cause, 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 ' Kara, this doesn't match that award, but the Office of Civic Engagement would like to give you a shirt, and we'll figure out what size fits you afterward. Yeah. So please join me in welcoming Kara Johnson back to campus.
This is sort of a brutal time to have a class, so hopefully the lighting doesn't put you to sleep, or that you're not feeling hangry, and that something I say will make you revolt. Okay, we gotta change this. And get my screen to work. Oh, it did the thing where it's only there. All right, perfect. So I am excited to be here. As it was mentioned, I used to work at the Kennedy Center. It's a little bit surreal to be standing at this pulpit, or I don't know, this thing to present, because I helped so many other speakers who were so much more qualified than me to present here. But I'm excited, and I feel passionately about the things that I'm going to talk about, and I hope that you can walk away with something from this presentation. I decided to focus my presentation on this, loving where you live, and that's something that I have found a lot of meaning in, and found a lot of purpose, and it's something that has helped me. And so let's see, go. This is a picture that I took the other morning, the last snowstorm that we had. I live in Salt Lake City, as Aaron mentioned, and I live in the Rose Park neighborhood, which is northwest Salt Lake City. And I am really close to the Jordan River, and I've fallen in love with it. It has a bad rap. It's dirty. Honestly, there's you can't swim in it like you can in the Provo River, and a lot of the banks of it are really not very stable. It hasn't been cared for in some time, but it's my walk in the mornings. I take my dog here on a daily basis. I walk here with my friends, and I commute to work on the Jordan River Trail. And so it's become special to me, and I can't help but love it. It's a gem to me. It's become a refuge. This particular section is so beautiful to me. It's my favorite section of the Jordan River Trail. It's very peaceful. This morning I saw a belted kingfisher on my walk, which was really exciting. That's a bird. And in case you haven't reached that point of being into bird watching, it'll come to you. Anyway, I wanted to start here because this place has become special to me. I moved here a year ago, and it's special to me also because I work as a public lands planner, and this is one of the projects that I get to work on. And so it's extra significant that this trail and this river that I interact with every day is also one that in my job I'm helping to improve, and I'll get to that. I wanted to back up to how I grew up. I was raised by really wonderful parents, and this was good. I'm glad that I have my slides to remind me of what I'm wanting to talk about. Someone who I'm a huge fan of is Wendell Berry. He's an agrarian essayist and poet and writer. He lives in Kentucky, and he wrote a book called The Unsettling of America. And in it, in the first chapter, he talks about how we as a people are always kind of searching for the next thing. We're searching for the gold that, like, people that came to the Americas, the settlers, there's people living here prior, obviously, but came here searching for gold, and they're kind of always moving to the next place, looking for that next thing. And he has this quote: "There has been another tendency, the tendency to stay put, to say, no farther, this is the place. So far, this has been the weaker tendency, less glamorous, certainly less successful." And I want to start with that because I think in each of us is this tendency to search for the gold. Especially as students, you're here at BYU, you're obviously ambitious, and you have plans for the future. You're also, like, here at 5 o'clock that's impressive, and that's cool that you're searching for the gold, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I love this idea of this tendency that we can also tap into to stay put, to put our roots down, and as students, that can sometimes be a hard thing to feel, but it's something that I have found a lot of significance and a lot of meaning for me in trying to find those roots, and that leaning into that tendency to just stay put. That doesn't have to mean that you aren't succeeding if you stay put, and I'll continue to touch on that. So anyway, I grew up internationally. I started my life in Russia. I am not that cute child in a blue suit. I'm actually attached to my mom inside her coat. I was born 6 months into them moving to Russia, and my brother is just 18 months older than me, and so my blessed mother was taking care of these two babies in Russia, didn't have a car, so she's using public transportation while my dad's at work. They're superstars. Here's another picture of them. We lived in Russia for 3 years, and then we moved to Ecuador, where my little sister was born. She has dual citizenship, which I'm kind of jealous of. I did not get dual citizenship. We lived in Ecuador for 4 years, and my dad works for the church, by the way. That's why we're moving. He was a controller over finances. And then we moved to Mexico, where we lived for another 4 years. And then we moved to Guatemala, where we lived for 2 years. I hadn't lived in the United States at all in my life up until I was 13 when we moved to the United States for the first time. Obviously stoked about it. I really loved living internationally, and it was something that was important to me. And I mean, I didn't know any different, but I loved the adventure of it. I loved how my parents helped us explore the countries that we lived in. They did a really wonderful job of as best as they can. Like we're white people living in these countries, and we are in the like upper class of these countries. But they tried to. We always went to local wards and branches, and we went to bilingual schools, and I was able to experience kind of flowing across economic divides and racial and religious. Like I just like learned how to be like very fluid in my interactions with people, and I really valued that about my childhood. And for that reason, I always felt like when I came to BYU that I wanted to study something that would guarantee that I lived internationally, because I really loved that childhood that I experienced and what I gained from growing up that way. And so I was trying to find something like what can guarantee that I will live internationally. That's what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do internationally. I just knew that I wanted to experience that again, the thrill of moving and experiencing different cultures and different languages and different religions. And tried looking into international relations. The economics class was just like absolutely not how my brain works, and was honestly having a hard time trying to find passion in school. I love learning, but honestly, like I don't thrive in a school setting, and yeah, I struggle with that. And there was one summer in particular that I felt particularly discouraged. I felt like I needed to decide what I needed to study. I'd returned home from my mission already and was having a hard time narrowing in on like, what is it that I'm passionate about? I want to live internationally, but I don't feel like I have anything that can get me to that place. And also there's like so many other factors to living internationally that like are kind of out of my control. That summer I was between a few different jobs. I didn't have a car when I was a student. I was commuting by bike, and between the jobs, my bike commutes sometimes ended up being like 20 miles a day, and it was just the best thing for me. I had earlier that year, one of my close friends had died in a car accident, and so there was a lot of sort of trauma that I was working through and grieving, and being on my bike was really healing. I really loved my early mornings. One of my jobs was working for Provo City Parks and Rec, and I'd bike over to the trail that I was maintaining, and that like sunrise bike ride was so therapeutic for me. And then I'd work on this trail, and I became very aware of my surroundings because I was biking so much. And I wanted to, because I became aware of those surroundings, I started wondering, like, how can I, like this part of my bike commute, I don't always feel very safe on. How can I maybe advocate for this to be a little bit safer for people like me that are getting around by bike? I joined a few Facebook groups and kept seeing one name like pop up a lot. It was Aaron's name, and decided to reach out and just ask him some questions about bikeability in Provo. I don't even know if you remember this conversation. He introduced me to the bicycle committee, both on campus but within the city as well. So that happened, and then one summer evening, my friend invited me to come help paint the mural of the Bicycle Collective that had just recently moved to a building in the Joaquin neighborhood, which is the neighborhood just south of campus. And I didn't know anything about the Bicycle Collective, but I decided this would be a fun thing to do on a summer evening. And so I went and helped paint the mural. Some of you might be familiar with this mural. It's on 200 North, 400 East. And I'm down in the corner there painting. This day was really transformative for me because I'd had all these thoughts floating around in my head of like, how do I make Provo, how do I help Provo be more bikeable, and what's my place here? What am I going to study? And I had a conversation with that lady in yellow. Her name is Celeste, and she was just a neighbor. She lives down the street from the Bicycle Collective, and she was telling me about how she was really involved with Habitat for Humanity, and she's lived in Provo for many years, and has helped with Habitat for Humanity for years, and knew like of these different houses that she'd helped build or paint and the people that lived there. And she also like helped plant a lot of the trees in the Joaquin neighborhood, and she was so happy to see these trees growing, providing shade. And she talked to me about her involvement with the neighborhood board and trying to help the neighborhood that she lived in be more friendly to pedestrians. And I was so awestruck by this conversation with this woman who's so committed to her community and was doing things in that community to make it better, not just for her, but for future generations. I left that conversation with this epiphany that maybe living internationally isn't what I needed. I tried to think about like, what was it about those experiences growing up? What was it that like actually mattered to me? And I was able to distill it to being the community. My parents did a really great job of introducing us or like building communities wherever we lived. And that ultimately, like that's what made those experiences meaningful. It wasn't like this, although it was so cool to live internationally and to meet all these different people, it was that there was people that we got to know and people that we got to love. And then I saw that in Celeste, that she was doing that right here in Provo, that she was making this place better. And so I left that conversation realizing, oh, I don't need to like move internationally. I want to, if that opportunity presents itself, great, awesome. I would love to jump on that. But I also don't want to be disappointed in my life if I don't live internationally. I want to be happy and feel like I'm contributing wherever I end up living. I want to love where I live. And so I decided that was something I wanted to pursue. I decided, or I started to recognize that my mind very much pays attention to the urban environment and how it interacts with itself. And so I decided to pursue urban planning as my, geography as my major and urban planning as my emphasis. And I came to love Provo. I found a lot of wonder in this place, and rather than trying to explore or like go far away, try to get out of this place, I wanted to discover Provo as a beautiful destination in and of itself. I fell in love with Utah Lake. I almost cried when I was coming into Utah Valley from Salt Lake today because it's so beautiful. The mountains, every time I see them here, it just hits my heart. The lake, I mentioned the belted kingfisher earlier. There's great bird watching out at the lake when the bug hits, which it will. Utah Lake is the place to go. I started to discover a lot of hidden gems in Provo, and it became this place of wonder and this place that I came to care about and wanted to improve, which was an interesting thing to experience as a student because your world can be so full of other students and people your age in a similar stage of life. I mean, you have like your professors, but it sometimes feels like there isn't a lot of interaction with the outside world, the people that live in Provo. Anyway, I started volunteering at the Bicycle Collective where I helped paint that mural and got involved enough and volunteered enough, was seen frequently enough that they decided to hire me. I was the only female employee at that time, and I started a women's trans femme night where we welcomed people who identify as women to come and learn about bicycle mechanics, have this safe space to learn this trade and just hang out, honestly. Something that I loved about working at the Bicycle Collective was that it brought so many different people into my life that there's a lot of students that would come into the Bicycle Collective to fix their bikes because so many of us, that's our form of transportation. And so students would come in, but there's also long-term residents that would come in. There's a lot of refugees or immigrants coming in who didn't have a means to buy a car, and they would come in and we'd get bikes for them. I loved those interactions. I also taught a class at the detention center, so I was also working with students. And later on, when I came back to the Bicycle Collective, we started teaching a class at the Alternative High School, Independence. And that opportunity to just have exposure beyond just like my student realm was meaningful and significant to me and gave a lot of perspective and helped honestly put a lot of what I was learning in my classes into practice of this connection to community, trying to build that community. I don't know what slide's next. Okay, so then I graduated from BYU and I moved to Virginia. I had felt drawn to the East Coast, and as sad as I was to leave Provo, I was really stoked about this opportunity to work as a city planner, which is what I studied. So I moved to this small city in Virginia. It's in central Virginia. It's not DC area. It's like 2.5 hours south of there, and beautiful place. It's like nestled into the Blue Ridge Mountains, right at the entrance of the Shenandoah Valley, which has incredible farms. The access to food was just, I miss it. It's like unbeatable. I also got a dog when I lived in Virginia. That's Otis. And so I worked in Virginia as a city planner, and I wanted to just briefly talk about this because I left. I loved Virginia so much. I loved Waynesboro so much. I took these lessons that I had learned from Provo, moving to a new place where I knew absolutely no one. I tried to get involved with the bicycle community because that's something that I was familiar with. I'd had a bicycle community here in Provo. I met people that way. But ultimately, I just met a lot of people just from my walks. I'd go on a lot, before I even got Otis, I'd go on a lot of walks in the neighborhood, and I started to meet different neighbors. There was this family that they're like, hey, we always see you walking by. What's your name? Like, oh, I'm Kira. And there was one time where they're like, hey, were you out of town the other week? Because we didn't see you for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, I love that these people are looking out for me, that probably if I disappeared for any longer, they would somehow try to track me down and make sure that I was safe, which made me feel secure as just a single person that moved out to Virginia on her own. My job as a city planner I didn't love, which was surprising to me because it's something that I felt so much passion when I was a student and felt so excited about this opportunity to change a city and add all my good ideas to it. And the reality was that I'm this idealist, and it's hard to shift a city to believe in the same things that you do. And Waynesboro just wasn't quite there. They love their cars, and they love their just openness and their privacy, and that was hard for me because I feel I'm not motivated by, well, I'm very passionate. I'm driven by those passions. And so it's like, I came here because I was really stoked about the setting of this place and the opportunity to help it be more people friendly and more like life-sized city. And the projects that I was put on were ones that contradicted my values, and it was hard for me to work on projects where I felt like, oh, I don't actually feel like this is contributing to a good urban environment. And so that was hard. But something cool that I did do, and something that I am happy that I got to experience, was in 2020, I was awarded a grant from the Department of Health, and we chose like a small interdisciplinary team. And we had to do this all virtually because it was 2020, but we gathered weekly, and we were given some money to implement a project that would improve the health of the community. And here in Provo, Bike Walk Provo had done several tactical urbanism projects where you take low cost, like low impact materials and transform an urban environment or like a street to show what it could look like or what it could feel like. And nobody on my team had heard of tactical urbanism, but I said, I think there's a lot of potential with the money that we've been given to transform an intersection, transform a part of our streets to show people what it could feel like to not be so auto-centric. And the team that I was on got behind that idea and were really excited about it. We reached out to the like city engineers, all sorts of different departments within the city, and we got their approval. And narrowed in on this intersection, this really problematic intersection across from the high school, that students were frequently crossing from this side where the high school was over to this building, which had some classes, and that, not this one that's being painted, but the other street is sort of a main thoroughfare, and cars would travel quite quickly, and there was a lot of close calls with students crossing the streets and cars rapidly turning. So we decided, let's focus our efforts on this intersection, try to help slow down the traffic while still keeping it flowing, but prioritize the students who are crossing this space. We worked with a high school arts class. I presented a little presentation about the importance of street design and how that can impact our decisions. Came up with a sort of blank canvas of like, these are the improvements that we're going to make, but what is it going to look like? The students drew up designs, and then the community voted on which mural they were going to have implemented. And so one was selected, one won, and we had community members come out and help us paint this like 6,000 square foot mural. And it was neat because we had young children helping us, we had older people helping us, we had a lot of students helping us. It just kind of like reached across the generations, and we created this really beautiful mural. Oh, by the way, this is the family that I met on my walk that asked, like, oh, you were gone. They came out to help. This was the student whose artwork was selected. It was this like very groovy mural. And the community loved this. They thought it was so cool. I moved away from Virginia shortly after, but after I moved, they did two more of these tactical urbanism projects within the city at other like problematic intersections. And that was cool for me to feel like, okay, there wasn't much that I felt like I could do within this job, and there wasn't too much that I loved about the actual job itself, but I'm happy that I could take a lesson that I learned in Provo and bring it to Waynesboro, and that they were able to find meaning in that project and find an opportunity to improve their city in more places than just this one. So as I mentioned, I moved back to Provo after working in Virginia for about 2 years. An opportunity came up to work at the Bicycle Collective, which, as I previously mentioned, I worked there when I was a student, and the director position had opened up, and it felt like a great opportunity to come back. And I'm so glad that I did, because experiencing Provo not as a student was really neat. It's such a cool place to live, and the Bicycle Collective is such an important place to me and provided such an incredible community. We'd frequently host bike rides, we hosted classes. There was just a very strong group of people that came to the Bicycle Collective and that rallied around this common interest of bikes, or just of people, and they'd get a bike to join the cool people. And I also got re-involved with Bike Walk Provo, which is an advocacy group advocating for safer streets for all users. That grounding of like being rooted by these organizations that were trying to improve the wider community is what inspires me and is something that I found a lot of importance in, and something that I want to continue to carry with me. I did move from Provo, though, as I mentioned. But what's cool is that the job that I currently have, which is a public lands planner, I was introduced to my boss when I was a student at BYU, but not when I was not acting as a student. It was when I was volunteering with Bike Walk Provo. He was the project manager of Cougar Boulevard, which used to be Bulldog Boulevard, and it was like the worst street in Utah, and now it's a really wonderful place to walk or bike, and even drive if that's what you decide to do. And anyway, he was the project manager, and since I was working with Bike Walk Provo and advocating, we had meetings with him, I guess. I don't specifically remember meeting him, but we must have had enough of an interaction where we connected on LinkedIn. And then years later, when he had a job opening, he thought to reach out to me and say, hey, this job is opening. I would love to talk with you about it. And after that conversation, I decided this is a really cool opportunity. As much as I love the Bicycle Collective and love this community in Provo, this feels like a neat opportunity to take my passion of improving an urban environment and help Salt Lake City be more green and give people greater access to nature. And so I left the Bicycle Collective. There's Otis. My goodness. Yeah. And now I work as a public lands planner. And I get to do cool things like climb on playgrounds for work. Something that is different about my job in Virginia, where I was working as a planner, and now my job where I'm working as a planner in Salt Lake City, I was nervous because I was like, I didn't really like city planning. I don't know if I want to go back into the planning world. But what I found is that it really depends on the values of the city that you're working in if you decide to work for a city. That my values just didn't quite line up with Waynesboro's, and so it was hard for me to work on projects because I didn't feel like they were true to me. Whereas in Salt Lake City, when I read through the master plan for the Public Lands Department, their values were to sustain the environment, the urban forest, to connect, so making their parks more accessible, making bike trails more beautiful, making sure that parks and green spaces are close to the people in Salt Lake City. Another one of their goals is to be welcoming, that they wanted their neighborhood parks to better reflect the identities of those neighbors. And another one is to protect, and that one specifically talks about the Jordan River, and also talks about the stories of the people of Salt Lake City and making sure that all stories are protected. And then another of their values is to grow and making sure that we're investing wisely and moving wisely with the environment and making sure that we're growing smartly. And so I felt like this is cool, this is neat stuff, and I have been really stoked about the projects that I get to work on. I started off my talk by showing you that picture of the Jordan River Trail, which I've really come to love, and the river itself, even though it's dirty and I can't swim in it, and there's so many trash piles. I saw a propane tank in there this morning. It's really sad. But I love the river, and I've come to care about it, and that care for the river the hope that I have in its future comes because I get to interact with people who have cared about the river for a lot longer than me. And so one of my projects, we're calling it the Emerald Ribbon Action Plan. We're picturing the Jordan River corridor as being this gem of Salt Lake City, that when you look at Salt Lake City, there's this ribbon of green that connects different parks and different people, and is a beautiful place that people can come and find refuge within an urban environment. So we're creating this action plan to help capture people's vision and design some concepts that show that vision reflected, and then coming up with specific strategies and projects to carry out that vision. And that's been an exciting project to work on. Like I mentioned, working with people that have loved the river for a lot longer than me has been inspiring, in the same way that Celeste inspired me, because she's loved Provo for a lot longer than I had, but it instilled that love in me. Same thing with the Jordan River Trail. People will talk about the river as being the veins that lead to their heart, and they talk about it in such a poetic sense. There's one of the focus groups that we had for this Emerald Ribbon Action Plan that we're creating was with the Karen community, and they talked about how a river flowing from south to north is very sacred in their culture, and that there's religious practices that they would like to perform in the Jordan River because of this sacredness of flowing south to north, but that because of its current state, they're not able to do that. Anyway, these kind of conversations are so beautiful to me, and we've done a lot of workshops already, and we have next week's going to be so full of more workshops that I'm really excited to just continuing to hear from these people that care about this place. Anyway, I guess all of that to say that there's a way to root yourself even if you continue moving around. I want wherever I live to feel like home, and to feel like there's people that I connect with, and there's a community that I belong to, and that I want to leave that place better than when I found it. And that might be in the smallest way, and I think maybe even more importantly than me leaving the community better than how I found it, I hope that the community can touch me wherever I live, and I hope that each of you, as you decide on like your future career paths or what you want to do with the future, that you think about the place that you belong to, and trying to actually belong to that place and love where you live, and finding reasons to love that place. I have experienced that there's a lot more satisfaction that comes from that, and a lot more enrichment that comes from that experience of giving to the community that gives to you as well, gives you this place to live. And I'm still like coming to love Salt Lake City. There's these parts like the Jordan River Trail or my neighborhood Rose Park that I love. There's this park that has these cat sculptures that whenever friends come to visit, I always take them by that park because it's so small and so random and so endearing. But there's these hidden gems that you can find anywhere you live, and that's important. There's so many organizations, probably wherever you move to, that are caring about the place that you live in, and I'd encourage you to find something like that you can get involved in. And the last thing that I wanted to say is I had to be honest with myself about my local versus global effect. I had these dreams of living internationally, and that might happen. But for me, I found that I get really overwhelmed with these like global topics, global issues, and I have a hard time like seeing myself change things to that scale. But at least on a local level, I can see my change in some way. That there's people in Provo that have access to transportation because I worked at the Bicycle Collective, or there's trees that are planted along the Jordan River Trail because I helped dig those holes. So I hope that you find a way to love where you live, and I hope that you love Provo while you're here. It's a really, really cool city, and there's a lot that it has to offer, and there's a lot that it has to teach you, and there's a lot of incredible people that love this place and have decided this is their home forever. And I hope that you find a way to tap into those minds and those brilliant, those brilliant people. So that's what I have to share. Here's my contact info, I guess, if you have any questions or have any ideas, or just need a connection down the road. I'm happy to be that. Thanks for listening to me talk.
Thank you, Kara. That was great. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so I invite you to.
Staying here.
Yeah, you're staying here.
Don't ask any hard questions, though. Yes.
I don't know if it's a hard question.
Oh no.
So right now I'm actually trying to write a paper on mega events like the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Salt Lake City
Yeah.
they just put in their bid to host, and that voting on who will host is coming up in the summer. Is there any like planning right now, just like preemptively, if we win this bid, like let's start on these projects now, or is that something that would be tackled in the future?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about planning is that people think about things so far in advance. So Salt Lake City passed a bond that voters approved in November 2022. It was $85 million that they'd be taxed over certain, I don't know how bonds work, taxed over certain, their taxes increased a certain amount, that there's $85 million available for parks, trails, and open spaces. And my job was created as a part of that. But one of the reasons why they even did that was in anticipation of there might be the Olympics here, and we want to get ahead of that and improve our parks, trails, and open spaces before that happens. So all the projects that I'm working on will be finished in like no more than 10 years, which is also exciting to me, that like the projects that I'm working on have funding and they will happen in the next couple of years.
And then on top of that, with like the baseball and the hockey stuff that's been going on, is some of that money going to those projects too?
So the bond money isn't, but they're certainly like a part of the conversations that we have, and we're like very tuned into those. There's a lot of unknowns of how they'll pan out, but we're all in conversation with each other.
That's cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a neat paper. My boss had a meeting today with people in Salt Lake County to talk about big projects in the next 10 years that need additional funding. So there's a lot of excitement around what's going to happen. Yes.
So I grew up in Buena Vista, which is like,
Oh, cool. Yes.
So I know what you mean when people don't really know don't really want to change what they think it's already working really well, even though it's obviously not working very well. I was a student rep on the city council, and just like trying to bring simple stuff up for like budgets and stuff. They're like, oh, we're not going to do that just because we haven't done that before. And it's like, bruh,
Yeah.
you just can't do anything. But so it's cool that you've been able to find a job where your interests or your values do align with what you want. But do you find is there still any level of pushback where you're like trying to introduce a new idea in Salt Lake, or is it kind of just like everything they do I love and I'm like on board? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Honestly, so far it's been one of the refreshing things about working for Salt Lake City is I've been very impressed at how forward-thinking the administration is, and like my boss and my boss and my boss that they're thinking about green spaces in a very progressive and very holistic way. But I might come up against something. So far I haven't, thankfully.
Kind of a follow-up question. Do you feel like there's a generalization to small towns versus large towns in that aspect? Or is it like every town is different? Like big towns could have that, small towns could. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I don't know that I feel like I can answer that because it would be such a generalization. Small towns have a lot of potential because they're small and they're probably growing, and so if you there's a way, I guess, to change the narrative. And I think a lot of it comes down to educating about these new ideas. And so even though, like I left Waynesboro and left that job, I hope that in a very small way I was able to broaden the minds of the city engineers, that they're like, oh, there's a way to make our streets safer and it doesn't have to cost us millions of dollars yet. Like, we can test out these bulb outs by using low cost materials, narrowing the street width and widening the space for the pedestrians. We can test that out and see how it feels and then maybe invest in it. So there's, long roundabout answer. Not all big cities are good either. I went to Dallas and it was, sorry if any of you are from Dallas, not walkable. And that's a huge city. And yeah, so I guess it depends. Yes, and then you.
So in terms of getting things done, do you feel like the biggest obstacle is just people wanting to stick to the status quo, or do you feel like politics and like social identity is also an obstacle to just ideas? Like, what are your experiences with that?
A little bit of both, and one of the big obstacles too is money. That's a huge obstacle that if the city council isn't going, if the city council didn't feel, like that this plan was a good plan, and they're not going to fund it, and then all that effort is sort of wasted. So there's getting to the root of the like political identity, so that can then sort of transform the budget. And I felt frequently when I was working in Virginia, like, I wish there was people like the people at Bike Walk Provo that were coming up to these, or showing up to these city council meetings and telling the city council that they care about making this place more bicycle friendly, or that they like want to make it an outdoor destination, etc. So citizens' voices really have a strong sway, I think, especially in small cities. Yes.
You mentioned like intersectionality between like different members of your community with like city planning. What types of like careers or like groups do you usually interact with as a city planner?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So as a park, I'll just speak to my current job. As a public lands planner, I have projects across Salt Lake City, and there's different neighborhoods and different like pockets of people in each of those places. And so there's those different like cultures I get to interact with. Like on the west side, there's a lot of Pacific Islanders, there's a lot of Latinos, there's a lot of Asians, there's a lot of African refugees. There's this like broad swath of people that I love interacting with. But then it's also neat that in any of our conversations, we need to include other departments. And with my specific position, I don't feel like I'm too involved with the politics of things, but I forgot the root of your question.
Like what like organizations or like people do you interact with?
Okay, yes. And then, so yeah, with, for example, the Jordan River Trail project that I'm working on, there's a lot of nonprofits that are involved. There's like the Jordan River Commission, there's this community center, there's a lot of community centers, and there's, wow, now I'm blanking on all anyway, I guess there are, whoever is grounded in the community, we recognize that they have an understanding of the people that live there, and so those are the people that we're going to tap into, so that we aren't just like capturing the voices of people that show up to public meetings, because we recognize that that's not actually like representative of the general population. Yeah, sorry if that doesn't answer your question. I think we're out of time.
Thank you.